You're good, Rich. All right, we are live. We're going belly to belly with Frank Jasper, aka Brian Shute. Frank, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, guys. How are you?
Awesome, awesome. Thanks for joining us this evening. It's an honor and a pleasure to connect with you and talk to you and just pick your brain about some of the things you got going on. And I see you have been in contact with some other New Jersey natives in the wrestling world. The one Nick Suriano, I've seen some posts with him, and then I also know that you did some work at some point, and maybe still do with the one and only Jay Moore.
Yeah, I've moved to Carmel it'll be 4 years come November this year. And when I lived there in Pacific Palisades, yeah, I had a clinic there with my wife for over 27 years. And it was a health, fitness, and longevity clinic. And I have a background in athletic training because I was at Eastern Washington in that curriculum when I got cast in Vision Quest. So I did complete all my coursework there. So I have that Western mind that I brought into the Eastern practice as well. And it really supported the understanding of yin and yang in the body and how to balance, your organ systems and your meridians and the pathways, and then have the Western mindset in case I needed that piece with the patient was also there for me as well. And so I could talk in those terms if I needed to. Um, and so Jay Moore lives just up the street there in Malibu, and so he would come in and have sessions. And I haven't heard, I've been able to listen to the podcast that we did with him. It was several years ago, so I'd actually be interested in hearing that one at some point.
Oh, it was really good. We dove back into that this week, getting prepared and everything. We had listened to it when it came out because Jay's from New Jersey. He's also a wrestler, was a wrestling coach, and all that stuff. So it was really interesting to take a deep dive. And I guess, well, before we get into it, why don't you shout out all of your socials and everything, where the people can find you, where you want to direct them, and then we'll go from there.
So Instagram is Vision Quest underscore 1985 shoot, I believe. And then I have a couple of Facebook identities, but at the real or at the real Brian Shute is the easiest one. The other one is maxed out, so just go for that one if you want to reach out to me. But it's at shoot at shootshirts.com is my email there, and you can just go to the website anytime at shootshirts.com. That's where I have the shirts for sale, the photos, and on that platform there are some discussions about training, nutrition, just my thoughts on those subjects.
Awesome, awesome. Well, I want to get into the pre-story to Eastern Washington and all that stuff, but Jimmy and I were talking just before you came in, and we're curious, how often do people today at this point, are people still coming up to you and quoting stuff from the movie and that sort of stuff?
Well, it would be a wrestlers only kind of
Sure.
niche, but especially on Facebook, that's where I see most of the quotes from the film, of course, and because I'm in that world, and when I travel, when I go do appearances, that's when I really get to connect with the people and hear their stories, and it's just always interesting to hear, like, where were they when Vision Quest came out and the impact that it had on them, how it changed their thoughts, feelings. I just recently saw Dana White posted some video. Did you guys see that
Yes,
one?
I did.
Said it absolutely changed his whole look on life. And I was like, wow, that's pretty impressive. The ones that really hit home for me are the military guys that say, like, yeah, it got me through Citadel, it got me through, Afghanistan when I was there, and then Iran when I was there, and 3 tours. And I'm like, wow, it's just, if it helps anybody deal with those types of situations, I'm just, thrilled. And I honor those guys some people thought that I was a Marine, and I never want to pretend like I'm, a Marine. I looked like one. I had a haircut like one. I played around with a log like one. But now these guys are the real deal. They're out there taking care of us, doing the hard job. So kudos to them.
Yeah, definitely respect. So curious, like you said, we took a deep dive, and I recommend anyone that wants to hear more about the movie itself specifically to go listen to that more stories with Jay Moore to get more in depth. But I'm curious, you said you were an iron worker and you realized, right? Was it an iron worker?
Yes.
Yep. And you said that you kind of didn't see yourself doing that in like 30 years. It was hard on the body and that sort of stuff. So you went back to school and you were a bodybuilder. Did you, growing up and stuff, did you play sports? Did you have an athletic background? Did you have any wrestling experience?
Yeah, I grew up playing all sports basically. We lived in a small town for a while in Nez Perce, Idaho, third grade through eighth grade. And I loved basketball. I loved playing football. I was really small, by the way. So I was like one of the smallest guys on our basketball team. But I had good moves and I had good hands and I had fast hands. And so that's where my advantages were. They weren't in size. When I graduated or, from eighth grade, I was 104 pounds. I was 5'2", 104 pounds. And I was actually, of everybody in our family, Jaspers have a tendency to mature late and usually not until they get into college. When I graduated high school, I was barely 155 pounds. So, the interest in bodybuilding was from the book, Arnold Schwarzenegger's book, Autobiography of a Bodybuilder. And, I was like, this is it. And since I was small, there was some bullying aspects I had to deal with. But one thing that really helped is that in about fourth grade, my dad has a black belt in judo, and he was asked to start a club. And so we all went. We all learned how to, roll and fall and throw and leverage. Great thing about judo is the leverage points, and you don't have to be big to throw somebody that's bigger than you if you hit the right step inside and leverage their body. So that one was very helpful for me because I did use that in several, encounters with bullies where I could throw them or I could hold them and actually, almost choke them out because there's a great, wrestling or a judo hold that allows you to do that. So yeah, it
Awesome.
came in handy. And I was very much inspired with martial arts. I really love karate, and I was big into the Shogun series back when they had it. Now they're rebooting it. I'm rewatching it. I don't feel it's quite as good, I have to say. But martial arts has been a big part of my life. In my when I turned 40, I started keto and black keto. Brandon and I kind of snuck together, and we went through that whole process together. And that was a really great experience as well. So I had been doing mostly karate, Kenpo karate, things of that nature. And so this was more of a fluid flowing movement that was really also gives the advantage to a smaller person against a larger person if you have to use it. So I love my Aikido. I love the group of people that were involved. That's a lot like wrestling. You guys, you go through challenges and matches and events, and you bond on another level. So you're all there to support each other and lift each other up. And at least that's what you're supposed to be doing as a good wrestling partner, etc.
Yeah. I had a wise man and a good friend once tell me that shared suffering is a great way to solidify a friendship.
I also played tennis. I got into tennis one season. I love water skiing, snow skiing, and I just in Idaho there was three lakes within 5 miles of each other. So I had kind of an idyllic, high school time where I would jump out of bed in the morning, shoot on my car out to Hayden Lake, and get on our boat and drive across the lake to my friend's place, and we would jump in the boat and ski from like 8 in the morning until noon. And then I'd come back in and I'd go to work. I'd work at a pizza place at night and I would reboot. And then when I wasn't skiing, then I was playing tennis. I'd play like 4 to 6 hours every day. And I actually ended up getting a scholarship at North Idaho College after I graduated from high school. So I kind of transitioned. I was in that transition between wrestling. I wrestled for 3 years in high school, and my last year I didn't wrestle. I just played indoor tennis and then got a scholarship at the North Idaho College for that.
Okay, cool.
Frank, so you got this part playing shoot kind of on a whim, right? You weren't an actor, you weren't trying to be an actor, you were going to school to be an athletic trainer, and this kind of just fell into your lap, for lack of a better term. And now you're a holistic health practitioner, and I know it's sometimes when you're working on things like that, you tend to realize that everything kind of happens for a reason. Do you kind of have that mindset that that kind of opened the door and that was part of your path, or do you just see it as, nah, dude, I just got this part and I was lucky?
Yeah. I think everything happens for a reason. It's no, I think we talked about this before we went on air, but wrestlers can be kind of stubborn, and I was certainly one of those stubborn wrestlers. And the universe kind of puts things in my path, and then when I finally get it and follow it, then it's kind of like figuring that out. As a matter of fact, it was my intention was that I was going to be a bodybuilder and an athletic trainer, as you suggested. And a friend of mine just happened to be in the movie and came in to practice and said, hey, we're still looking for somebody 6 foot tall, muscular build, that can wrestle. He goes, "Yeah, that's you." And I was not interested, but he did say, like, these people are really cool. It's a lot of fun. You get paid for wrestling, so why not? And I had wrestled right before I came to came to Eastern Washington University at Pasco because a friend of mine was wrestling for Pasco and college, and they had nobody his weight. And so I was about 192 at that point, and so he was wrestling at that weight. So I just trained with the team for that entire season. So I had some fresh, wrestling skills again at another level. And then I was really pounding at the bodybuilding and really being aggressive in the gym. When I got up to 215 pounds, which is not easy for me, I had really have problem gaining weight, not losing weight necessarily. But I walked into that audition at 215 pounds. Now there was a series of 5 different auditions, so I actually had to work for it. And the last day we did the audition, I had to go and read for John Peters and Peter Goober and do the lines for them. And they flew a guy in from LA that they liked. The producers liked this guy from LA, and the director, Harold Becker, liked me. He had seen me. I'd been there a few different times. And so I end up reading for these guys, and then they say, okay, we're going over to the set because Coach Cash Stone needs to sign off on this guy to see whether he can wrestle or not. So we get on our wrestling gear, we go out on the mat, everybody stops, they got this mat lit up, and we go out on the mat, and Cash Stone starts calling out these takedowns and duck unders and arm drags, and we just went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth until he finally said, okay, I've seen enough. This kid can wrestle. It's from California. So it's up to the producers. And I waited there for a while, and 10 minutes walk by, and John Peters comes up. He goes, okay, kid, you got the job. So that was my process. But like I said, I was weighing 215 pounds. And so we had 2.5 weeks before they started shooting. And they had cast this role twice before, but neither one of those guys worked out. I don't know what the reasons were, but anyway, they were getting close. And so they really had to make it, happen soon. They said no particular amount of weight, but they said, we want you to cut down a little bit so you look closer to what Matthew is. Now, Matthew was just on the other end. He had a nutritionist working with him. He was working out. He was being fed supplements. He was lifting weights. He was trying to bulk up. And so it's ironic that my character was the one doing everything that his character was struggling with in the actual show. I stripped down 25 pounds, 2.5 weeks. And I was at 4% body fat. We did a water submersion in the performance lab there at Eastern Washington, so I knew exactly what I weighed. Shot for 10 weeks, and I went back to school. And I thought I was done. And I went back to bodybuilding and jacked myself back up to 217 after about 3 months. It took me that long to get back up there. I get another phone call. Hey, we got one more. We got one more scene. Are you available? I was like, wow, okay. I'm 217. I got to drop the weight. And they said, well, you got a month. So I said, okay, great. So I dropped the weight. I flew to LA, shot the scenes we did, and then flew back, went back to school, thought I was done. I went back to bodybuilding. And I'm hitting my all-time high. I hit 225, and I just felt, I just felt huge. I almost felt a little too big. I was struggling walking up hills. I was not in cardio shape, let's just say. I was in a bulking phase. I got another phone call 3 months later. So when you talk about the universe, and I said, okay, I can't go back down to 198 or 189. That's where I went down to. I go down to 200 pounds. That's it. It's just too, because you up and down your body like that is just really hard. And I wasn't doing it the right way. I was just doing it, hard way. And so I shot that last scene. Again, I dropped to 200 pounds, went to LA. We shot it. It was a scene I was wearing the jean jacket. So you may look at that scene and go, oh, he looks a little bigger. It's hard to tell. But anyway, that was the third time that I cut weight. And then I had a bodybuilding contest like 6 to 8 weeks later. And so it's really destroys your tempo going into a bodybuilding thing. And I really think the universe was basically telling me, like, no, we don't want you to be a bodybuilder. We want you to do something else. And it took me 3 times of the universe saying, no, this is not what you're going to do. I ended up placing fourth in an 8-state competition. So I wasn't happy with it. I was like, okay, I just really didn't hit where I wanted to. But that movie then came out almost a year later since we started, and I had a call from a place, APA agency in New York, and they said, hey, we want to represent you. Would you come to LA and interview? And we really like your work. And so I did. And I went to LA and I did a deep dive into the acting. And so I was doing 6 hours, from 6 to midnight, Monday through Friday. And then I was doing the midnight shift to 8 o'clock in the UPS throwing boxes. And then I'd get up and go to auditions and I try and get some food in there, some sleep in there. But I got to tell you, the process of being in those acting classes was a spiritual experience and a just extraordinary process for me to delayer myself about all the things rigidities and different things that I built up. I was unable to access certain feelings and emotions that then I, brought out in the acting classes, challenges. And so for me, it was my vision quest, you might say. So when I look at it, I absolutely think that this was all perfectly planned. This was my part of my story that I had to do, and it was a movie called Vision Quest. So it was my vision quest, my process, that brought me to LA, I found this beautiful woman that I ended up marrying after I was there for about almost 3 years. And my body, because I wasn't taking good care of myself, I was not getting enough sleep. I was not eating enough. I was doing the big grand slam at Denny's. That was my major, source of nutrition with coffee all day long. My body just started breaking down. And so after 3 years, and I had fun when I was there. I mean, I did a national commercial, I did a TV show, I did another scrappy movie that I don't even want to talk about. And I was I was doing the Conan show up at Universal Studios. It was a live action sword, and I was a double swordsman. I wasn't Conan because I had sort of slimmed down just a little bit because everybody in the acting community was like, "Oh, you're too big, you'll never get roles." Yeah, well, tell that to Schwarzenegger and The Rock and everybody else now that's out there doing the big guy thing. But anyway, I made that decision to go back to healing at that point, and I thought that, energetically, because I was into meditation, I was into crystals, I was into this whole deep dive into processing. And I thought, what is going to be the best place for me to use energetic medicine? And it was definitely acupuncture because that's all they talk about is balancing energy, yin and yang in the body. The meridians and organ systems have to really work together. You have to balance those. So that's why I went for wrestling or for acupuncture. I also, because of my martial arts background, because I love the Asian community, lifestyle, thoughts, beliefs, it was like this is my lane, and I went into it, and it was 5 years of I just enjoyed the whole process. So when I got out, my wife and I opened a clinic, and we can talk more about that if you want to know the nutritional piece of this too.
Yeah. What's the name of that clinic?
Well, it was called Osani Holistic Healthcare, OSANI. It sounds Asian, but actually it was a phonetic spelling in the Pygmy language for love.
Mhm. And talking about being an energy healer using the path of acupuncture, when you
Mm.
were on that podcast with Jay Moore, he talked about toning, and
Yeah.
you started, doing some different practices, and it was moving the needles in his body and
Mhm.
kind of moving stale energy in his body. So for someone who's listening to this podcast and they're kind of getting their third eye squeegeed right now for what we're talking about, what do you mean stale energy with tones and needles in the body? How can someone kind of is it possible for someone to do a self scan and kind of realize they have some stale energy in their body?
Well, absolutely. And part of that is to become more sensitized to your meridians and energy in general. And one of the things that helped was studying Qigong or Tai Chi. I studied Qigong for years and taught, for 20 years and taught it for 2 years. That will really sensitize you to what's happening with your body energetically. Meditation in and of itself, when I was just after I graduated, I started this process of meditating every day before tennis practice. And because my house was completely quiet, my brother and sister were at school, my mom was working, dad was gone. And so I would come home and I had this time where I would sit and meditate. And there was a time when I finished meditating and I just would do a 20-minute, just follow my breath. You don't have to get too crazy. You don't have to know the special mantra. But if you just follow your breath, try and listen to your heart, and what happens is your monkey mind will just jump in with all sorts of things it wants to think about, talk about, and get you engaged with. And you just have to look at it like, okay, that's a cloud, and I'm just going to let go of that cloud and let it drift by and go back to focusing on my breath. I'm going to try and listen to my heartbeat. And when you can start hearing your heartbeat, you've quieted things down to that point. And in that moment, I would ask questions to the what I would consider my higher powers, the greater knowledge that runs the universe. You can call it whatever you want. If it has different labels, but for me, it's a higher self energy that is in everything. You can call it God force, you can call it life force, you can call it ki or chi. Um, but I've had some really profound downloads from that. That would come in as a very wide understanding, and I would have to bring it down into this simple way to try and share it with you. But it's hard to take that expansiveness and bring it in and share it. But one time I got up from a meditation and I had shifted my energy enough to feel like I was almost just kind of floating and everything just kind of happened. And I was just kind of watching myself almost going through these motions. And I was getting ready for practice. And I was watching myself brush my teeth and thinking like, wow, this is bizarre how light and floaty I feel. I usually feel very heavy and very weighted. And those are all the things we carry around with us, our resentments, our angers, our traumas and stuff like that. Somehow a great deal of that had lifted for the moment. And then I went to practice, and it was one of these interesting things where I was being challenged for my position on the team. And I absolutely destroyed the guy. I don't even remember playing the two sets, but it was like 6-0, 6-1. And he actually, I'm sorry to say this, he actually cried on the shoulder of my coach because he just couldn't believe how bad he got destroyed. And had he played me on another day, it might have been a completely different story, right? But that day I was in flow, baby. And it stayed with me for a little while, but then, you know, we have to integrate and then we have to kind of find the next level.
Frank, I'm curious, how did you come to was it from the tennis side or was it from the martial arts side that you had your introduction to meditation?
When I was in fourth grade, I have an uncle Bob that came and visited us in Nez Perce, and he was one of the first people that was a vegetarian. It went back when it wasn't popular, and we were eating Wonder Bread and and Velveeta cheese and having cold cereal for breakfast. And we would always ask, "Would you like to eat with us?" He was like, "No, thank you. I have my nuts and seeds over here. I'm quite happy with them." And we all thought it was like, that was just a little strange. But he was into meditation and he had a book with him. It was called The Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda. And I voiced interest in that, and he left that book with me. And I read that book, and I was at that point, I was into the whole meditation and, you know, the Himalayas. Visiting. I wanted to go to India and visit the, you know, ascetics in the Himalayas and learn the greater truths of the universe, even when I was in fourth grade. So that's like the very peak, the beginning of that.
Well, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That is amazing. I don't think I came to meditation until I was like 35. So to be able to get into that, and the Yogananda book was probably even after that fact, probably Jimmy, when we were in Denver and Tom had it at his house and we started talking about
Well,
it.
I just finally finished it last year.
It's a profound book, and the one chapter that I think was really interesting when he explained the way the universe works and how we kind of work, you know, resonate to certain levels, and we move on to different ones, and that his guru moved on to this other planet that was very similar to Earth to work with people there, and I just like, well, that's a really cool explanation. And I just hold that as a vision. I am very much eclectic in my religious studies, or what I would say spiritual studies. I don't think I'm a religious person. I think I'm a spiritual person. And I try and just follow the tenets, be kind to those, your family, you know, take care of others as well when you can, do unto others as you wish them to do unto you. The golden rules, the simple things, try to stay on those paths. And, you know, there's a lot more going on here. And so just to circle back, because you had talked about toning, one of the things that I did is that I went to a study in the place called the Healing Light Center, and a woman was teaching this class about body symbology, and so she talked about we would always start the day toning, and so did they also did that during their Sunday services where they would all tone, do the, you know, ohms and things like this. And she talked about the higher tones would be in the high for the higher chakra, lower tones could resonate to the lower chakras, and to kind of the monks do each and every one of those to try and open and expand their chakras and keep them alive and keep them flowing, that kind of concept. So she kind of explained that concept. That's where I started working with toning. And we also, in acting classes, we had certain exercises. You know, the instructor that I worked with was Lee Strasberg's personal assistant for lived with him for 3 years, was personal assistant for 7 years. And so some of the acting, you know, practices were very spiritual in that. And we did toning as well. And those, some of those. So I've had it from all angles. And, you know, in Qigong, we have certain sounds for certain organs. And so this all kind of dovetails together. And I started to bring that into my practice, that not only would I just put the needles in, and most of the practitioners would just go, I know what I'm doing with the needles. I'm just going to put it in. I'm just going to walk into the next room. I'm going to do acupuncture on the next person and the next person, the next person. When I'm done with the fifth person will circle back, pull the needles out, and the person on the well, my feeling was that the acupuncture just opened the body up so that we could do deeper work. And so I would work with people that really wanted to go into what I call, cellular memory, where if you have anything, memories, they're held in every cell of your body. Part of the acting exercises we would do is we would take a ball and we would place it on different places in our body, and we would emote a different feeling. If you put it up here, it might be painful, because you got hit in the side of the head. You have a memory of a ball hitting you in the side of the head. Or if you put it in your hand, you might feel a little bit more happy because you remember like catching and throwing it with your friends or something like that, or throwing somebody out at a base. Or so you have senses, and there are memories that are held in your cells, and it's there for you to tap into at any moment. And so once we got the people on the table with the acupuncture, I would turn the lights down. I had really nice soft music, and I would use my craniosacral techniques, which then allowed me to tap into where the person was blocked energetically and where we needed to work on to release energy to help them heal faster. And many times those were powerful emotions, sometimes painful, sometimes sad, sometimes people laughed when they released, but it's a very powerful thing to add sound to that treatment, because sound will actually move energy very quickly through the body.
Man, there's a lot of different avenues I want to go from there because you mentioned a lot, and you're in that woo woo wheelhouse that we like to
Oh,
be in. So, it's very interesting that you mentioned that your acting classes and some of the acting stuff you did kind of had that correlation to some of the spiritual stuff and tapping into those emotions. I just graduated film school last year, and I took a bunch of acting classes at the end of college. Just I had extra stuff I needed to get done, so I took those, and I noticed a lot of those correlations too, as far as tapping into emotions. And same thing with some of the toning practices and some of the exercises the professor would have us do to kind of get into that place. So I definitely feel you on that one. And kind of going back to something that you said before when you were in fourth grade, your Uncle Bob autobiography of a yogi, you wanted to go to India and meet some of those people. Have you ever
yeah.
been over there?
I haven't. I have not been to India. And I've had some friends that went there, and they were yogis. They went and studied yoga there. And it's extremes over there. Extreme poverty, extreme wealth, extreme spirituality, extreme, where people like don't eat. They're just extremes. And he says, it's quite an experience. So I would love to go.
And another thing I wanted to circle back to about your Uncle Bob, you said he was the first vegetarian you ever met, and you deal a lot with nutrition and obviously working with meridians and chakras. There's a lot of correlations with nutrition and things like that, and there's a lot of dogma where we live. And some people will tell you not to eat meat, some people will tell you just to eat vegetables and be a vegetarian. I'm kind of curious with the work that you do, the nutritional protocols that you kind of give people, and is there times and place to eat meat? Is there times and place not to eat meat? What are your kind of beliefs and philosophies on that?
Okay. So, everybody thinks that this is the right diet for them, or for everybody. And it's like you really have to figure out what's going to work for you specifically. And this is the crux of what I'm doing right now. Like I said, you had mentioned that I was working with Jay Moore, but I also, like you said, I mentioned, I don't know if we talked about it on the podcast, but I've been working with Nick Suriano now for 4 years. And what we've come to understand, and this is where I want to take the wrestling community's mindset about diets and how to prepare for events, is that the old paradigm happened to be, to starve yourself and to dehydrate yourself and to overtrain to get to that weight that you need to get to. all of that is counter to really performing at any kind of high level. And so during my practice, let me jump back. During my practice, I found that most of the people that were vegetarians, not all, I had one that was I thought was actually healthy, but most of them are very unhealthy because they eat way too much sugar, they eat way too much, carbohydrates and way too much dairy. Um, and they um, start to break down. This is what I've noticed is they just don't, they struggle with certain things in their life and they can get sick very easily. I personally believe that animal products, if you're not, I mean, there's certain people that do it for religious purposes. And if you're really good at being a vegetarian, then you really get all the protein that you need, and you really watch those things that I just talked about, not having too many carbs, not having too much sugar, and things that break down into sugars, because those are mostly the carbs. You can do that, and you might be able to actually be very healthy. And there's some people that are athletes and they're vegetarians and they can perform and do that. But what I see is that your muscles really need protein. And I've been working with a standard process and product lines for over 30 years, and I find that they're a whole food nutrition grown on organic soils, and they use animal products in just almost all of their products. And then there's the herbal line, which is MediHerb, that I use both of these. And when we started working with Nick, we really looked at some different ways and understanding when you are carb loading. That's how a lot of people do sports, is they carb load. But what is carbs? What happens to carbs when they get into the body? Well, they break down into sugar. And what does sugar do to the body? Well, sugar is one of the most toxic things in our system on a lot of levels. It causes inflammation. It suppresses your immune system. It dysregulates your hormones. It feeds bacteria and viruses and cancer. I actually wrote an article on about how cancer feeds or sugar feeds cancer. It needs sugar and it needs some RNA, and it can replicate. So one of the guys that I've seen out there is using diet to kill cancer by starving it of its nutrition, which is primarily sugar, and if it can methylate. So if you can take those two things away, you can starve cancer and they just will die. They'll create apoptosis in cancer cells. So going forward, I really looked at that also. When you have extra sugar in your body, that sugar looks for receptor sites, and the receptor sites that it prefers are protein receptor sites. And when it finds them, it locks on and it creates what we call a rigid bond. Now you got a rigid bond and protein, which is your muscles. So as an athlete, when you have rigid bonds in your muscles, you get enough of those. And now the muscle you put a demand, a plyometric explosive maneuver, and ask the muscle to expand and contract again. It just expands and tears. It's too rigid. So it sets athletes up for injuries. And this is the thing I started noticing in professional athletes. We look at these guys, they've got the best physiologists out there training them. They've got the best nutrition supposedly, but you look at what they're drinking or what they're eating, and they're getting. I don't want to go after Gatorade, but if you look at most Gatorade, the ones that have been used so often, it's high fructose corn syrup and a bunch of other chemicals and food coloring, a bunch of junk that is like toxic. And guess what? That sets you up for injury. People think they're recovering, but they're throwing so much sugar in their bodies that you're just creating those, rigid bonds in the body. Here's an example of what I would see in my practice is right around the holidays. Like the next door neighbors, it was a real estate agency, and their secretary called me up that morning. She said, "Frank, I can't move my neck. It's stuck. It's stuck. It's just, I'm in so much pain." I said, "Well, what did you eat yesterday? Did you have any sweets?" And she would look at me sheepishly and say, "Yeah, a customer brought in like this whole thing of Christmas cookies, and I had 9 of those." And then she went to bed, and guess what? That was how quick it happened. So that's how quick it can manifest. Now, if we're thinking that we want to be better athletes, why would we want to continue that overuse of carbohydrates and sugars when we know that carbohydrates also will spike and crash, and then you got to do more, and it'll spike and crash. And so if you don't time it right, you're going to be on the mat out there, and you're going to crash. But guess what? There's another energy pathway. So you got your glycogenic pathway, but you've also got your ketogenic pathway, which is the breakdown and the process of using fat for energy. So but it's a muscle, it's like a muscle, right? You have to teach the body to burn fat for energy. But if you have carbohydrates every day at every meal, your body never gets used to using fat for energy. It always is going to use carbohydrates because that's the quickest, most available. But if you learn to become what we call, and this is what we did with Nick, a fat adapted athlete. I'm not in ketosis all day like some people will need ketosis. And I think you can do that short term and have benefit. I think you can be a vegetarian for a short time and have benefit. But long term, I think a fat adapted athlete performs better because the energy resource, even if you're in a fasted state. So let's say you didn't eat, you had dinner, so on 7 or 8, you didn't eat breakfast, and then you train like midday sometime. That's perfect because now your body has dumped all the glycogen out after about 8 hours, and now your body is up and running, and it's going to use now fat for energy. It'll break down and fat for energy. It will produce ketones, and ketones feed the brain. That's another thing, right? Fat is also one of these that even at that fasted state, you could have up to 30 to 40,000 calories still that you can rely on and tap into. And so the energy will stay at this level. And the byproducts from eating carbohydrates and processing them are toxic. So your body has to process that. But when you process fats and you're processing fat for energy, that is clean energy. Your body doesn't have to. So it's and it's 18% more efficient. Now, convincing the rest of the community is the big trick. So Nick has now won the NCAA's 125 wrestling from Michigan. He's gone over to France and won the international competition there a couple of times. He just wrestled at the Pan Am Games a couple of weeks ago, won the Pan Am Games. He's now prepping for the Olympic trials. So in 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, I think the 19th of April is when he'll be wrestling for the Olympics. And what I've seen is if you see him in his post interview down in Acapulco, water's just pouring off of him. We have him super hydrated. We have him just full on all his nutrient levels. So one of the things that I do, and this is where we get into a little woohoo too, is that in my process of energy and understanding energy and reading energy and also muscle testing, because it's the quickest way for me to tap into somebody. When they would come into my office, I would use just, instead of sending them out for blood work, which I used to do, and it'd be like $1,000 for this complete panel and all these things and find out what people were allergic to. I can muscle test them and send them out the door and have them on a protocol instantly by just doing muscle testing and testing all their reflexes to see which nutritional deficiencies or organ systems are suffering. And I can have them on a product out the door in an hour and a half, 2 hours. And so to me, that made sense. And so what I developed was this ability to tap into somebody, even if they're not in my room. Now I'm not just muscle testing the person in the room. As we learn in Reiki, you can actually send people energy. You can receive energy. You can pick up on energy. These are all in like Qigong and Reiki understandings. But Western medicine, they just have to have a test, which is fine, but you're just taking a picture of somebody at that moment. And as The woman that wrote Molecules of Emotion, Candace Pert, said, a scientist, says, we are more like a flickering flame than we are a piece of meat. And so you may get a picture of something when it's over here or when it's over here, but you need to know that we're very fluid and we need to be more dynamic with our tests. We need to do several tests to really kind of decide and take an average. I always just really got angry when somebody would go, oh yeah, I went to my doctor and he says I have adrenals, or I have hypothyroid, and I would check out their thyroid and be fine. And I said, did you have them test you 2 or 3 times during the day, or do they just test you in the morning or in the afternoon when your energy's down? And so they didn't usually do those tests several times a day over a course of a week to find some kind of average. They took one picture and decided that was the way it was for that person, which I think is very dangerous. So moving forward, what I now do from Carmel is that I will do nutritional consultation. I have a patient that's in Tennessee. I have patients that are in New York, New Jersey, Texas, Colorado. I have a patient that I treated in Israel last year because she couldn't carry her baby to term, and I picked up that she had dysbiosis and said she needed to pick up this product that I use to kind of heal the gut. You know, it's the tight junctions in the gut that start to degrade to create dysbiosis, and so when your body then allows large molecules to slip through those tight junctions and into your blood, then you have toxicity of the system, and you're not going to be able to carry a baby through pregnancy, through full term. And when we resolve that, 2 months later, she's pregnant. She's had the baby now. Baby's almost 2 years old. She's beautiful. So I've been able to use this to help people that I don't see in person. I can help them from a distance. And it's jumping into that, like you say, a little bit of the woohoo, but tapping into quantum energies and the fact that we understand that we're all connected energetically, and it's pretty much like we're in a big web. This is all a big web of life, and if you pull on a string, it's felt all the way across the other country.
Frank, a lot of what you said about ketosis and fat adapted and training on fasted and all that stuff. I love having these conversations because it validates pretty much how I've been training for the last 20 years and the last 10 as an ultra marathoner. I'm curious, you mentioned you and Nick have been working together for the last 4 years. How did that relationship come about? How did you guys connect?
Well, so you had mentioned Jay Moore. Well, somehow Jay Moore and because of Jersey, I'm guessing, and Nick were connected. And so Nick and his family came out to California, and they hung out with Jay a little bit. And Jay says, well, you got to go see Frank. And then they said, well, who Frank Jasper? And they realized that it was Brian Shute from Vision Quest. And so when they came to the office, Nick told me that his dad played Vision Quest probably 4 to 5 times a week on just every night. So when you talk about, Richard was talking about, what do you believe as far as connectivity? It's like Nick and I knew each other before we knew each other. There was some kind of a force that drew us together. And so we met, and I did energy work on him, acupuncture on him. He loved it. He says, I want to work with you. And we started working together. And so I've been his nutritionist now for 4 years. And when I can, we get my hands on him, then I'll do acupuncture. I'll do fascial release technique. I'll do cranial sacral. I'll do the toning. He loves the sound therapy toning that we do during the treatments as well. And he is amazing in the fact that when we cut carbs out, and I mean, we cut all grains out. And so the carbs are just going to be basically in the vegetables. And then every now and then we'll have some blueberries, or we'll have some, complex carbs. We'll do like a sweet potato. But he is all in. He was eating organ meats. He was doing bone marrow. He was, he's a beast. And his performances has really bared out that he really can, as a fat adapted athlete, he doesn't get weaker throughout the tournament. He gets stronger, and everybody's trying to recalibrate and reconnect and trying to reload. And we've got him down there far enough where he walked into the Pan Am Games, he was about 3 pounds underweight, which you don't ever hear, right? It's like nobody goes underweight. And so this was about 3, 4 days before. And I said, okay, great. We're going to eat into this, we're going to eat into this match, this tournament. And you're going to kill these guys because everybody's trying to like starve down, drop that last few pounds and then step on the scale and try to get it back before they step on the mat. Well, it takes a day and a half, something like that to rehydrate on a cellular level. And your brain really needs hydration. Your cells need hydration. Now, it's like we're just being really foolish not to look at this as a potential way to be, having a diet that is primarily like vegetables, salads, and protein, healthy fats. And we kind of pushed the fat thing for a while. He went all the way into ketosis. And what happens when you go into all the way into ketosis and you stay there is that your body doesn't hold on to electrolytes. And so I hadn't suggested that to him. He had just read this book and we were on that road, we were in and out of that and we were just touching on it. And he was like, I want to see how this works if I just go into ketosis and stay there. Well, he would blow out all of his electrolytes. And so here's the deal with electrolytes. And so we want to talk about recovery and how important is sugar and how important is are electrolytes. And I just believe that a little bit of sugar goes a long way, and electrolytes is really the main game here. Some protein as far as giving the muscles something so they don't break down, you don't lose your muscles. That's another piece. But electrolytes are the catalyst in your body to allow your body to absorb vitamins. So one of the things I would do is I would take a trace mineral drop in this bottle, and my patients, that 99% of them were, electrolyte deficient. And I would put a drop of that trace mineral on their finger. These are all the trace minerals that they need, essential minerals. And it would stay there as a drop on the tip of their finger. And the reason it would stay there is because the osmotic charge that was into that area, into the drop of minerals there. And so it held in a drop. And so I would have them touch their tongue. I just have them say, just barely touch your tongue on that. And if you do that, you'll get a charge. It's like touching a 9-volt battery. You will actually feel a charge from electrolytes. And so that's what's happening on a cellular level. The electrolytes, the minerals, have this charge that creates a catalyst for you to then produce, utilize nutrients, produce energy, etc. So it's so important. And so you can't make it all the time because it's really mean to love to balance, I think. Maybe there's a way to do it, but I just prefer to kind of come in and out. We're in ketosis, you're fasting, you train. Why is it so important? Or why is it great to do that training while you're in a fasted state? Because you're teaching your body, you're training that muscle to burn fat for energy. And when you are trained at that level, at that end, you're also stimulating your own HGH production. So you got a twofer going there. You're burning fat, you're getting energy, training a muscle, and you're increasing your own HGH production. Now, what do you do differently as far as for your training? Are you similar to that? Are you on a very strict, or do you carbohydrates, or where are you with your diet?
I'd say I'd lean mostly towards a carnivore-esque diet. When I get tired of it, I'll incorporate, vegetables, broccoli, cauliflower, things like that. I'll do some blueberries in the summertime. I'll switch a little bit more to like melons and those sorts of things and incorporate that. But yeah, I mean, I would say, I guess if anything, maybe kind of like paleo-ish. I try to avoid processed foods. I try to, not eat breakfast or go into, get my workout in before. Sometimes, with work and stuff, that leads me going till, it's like today I went, until about 1 o'clock after my workout where I ate. Um, and then when I'm training, longer efforts on the weekends and stuff, I'll have a little bit more of like your typical cleaner versions of like the endurance kind of fuels, the gels and those sorts of things, just quick carbohydrate sources. But I stretch them out. I won't, I'm not one of those athletes that's, oh, I have to have a gel every 30 minutes or anything like that. I try to do no more than like 150 calories an hour if I'm doing like a 100-mile race, just because I look at it more of like a slow, like IV drip kind of infusion of some sort of carbohydrate or a substance like that to take in. And then as I get longer, I'll do things like beef jerky and those sorts of things.
Mhm.
And sometimes I'll do nut butters
Mhm.
and get the fat in and that sort of stuff. But I'm curious for you when
I
you
love it.
mentioned,
I love it.
I'm curious, you mentioned the trace minerals. Are you referring to just the brand trace minerals or just in general, like electrolytes, trace minerals? And if so, do you have a preferred electrolyte source?
So I have a few different sources, and it's so the just the basic concept would be like, oh, well, you can get a majority of those electrolytes just from Himalayan salt or Celtic salt. So
Hmm.
that to me, like, well, I'll start my day. First thing I do is I go down, I take a pinch of Celtic salt, I put it on my tongue, I let that melt. I go over and get we have a small lemon tree that my wife has out in the patio. It's got these Meyer lemons, and so I'll cut a small slice and put it in some water, and I'll be sipping that once this is melted, and I'll kind of drink, a glass of water. Then I'll start I'll have just a cup of bulletproof coffee. I don't know if you've tried that. Have you tried the fat adapter, the fat coffee?
Yes, sir.
And so that's what I'll do in the beginning, and then I just won't eat until midday. It's usually between 1 and 2 o'clock. By the time we finish midday, we're at like 1:30 or 2 time before we can get a lunch in. Um, then my next level would be there's a company that's called Keto Drops, which are electrolytes in the drops that you can just add to water. So that's a little bit more formulated. That one is one I like. And then I go to this elite, what I call an elite level. And you have to be careful where you source this, because there's a lot of imitations out there. And it's Renee Keene-Tone created what we call um, marine-based plasma, for lack of a better word. But it is where they go to the plankton bloom in the ocean and they draw up what these zoomorphic plankton are releasing out, because they don't have any they don't have any process. They have to release digestive enzymes to break things down, and they suck it in and they release things. And this is because there's a understanding that we still carry the ocean. We came from the ocean. We still carry the ocean in our blood. Our blood is very close to the ocean, except because what's happened because of global warming is that oceans have become much more concentrated in their salt content. But there used to be a much closer relationship to that. Marine-based plasma is drawn up and it's put through a process called cold processing. And this was back in a guy, like I said, the guy's name was Rene Quintone, back when Louis Pasteur was all about, hey, we got to heat and we got to kill stuff. Well, what Rene Quintone decided is that if we don't heat it, but we still cold purify it, we retain all of these nutrients, we'll retain enzymes, and not destroy or impact the 90 billion gene expressions that are in these marine-based plasma. And so he does it and he creates it. I can grab a bottle to show you, but it comes in these glass vials that you snap an end off. There's just liquid in a glass vial. You snap an end off, and then you put it in your mouth and you snap the other end off, let it go into your mouth, absorbs into the buccal mucosa, and then you can swallow after a little bit. That is, to me, the best choice that I could find right now, that has got not only the electrolytes in there, but the 90 billion gene expressions that will like ignite anything that's maybe dormant in your body that needs to be, fed.
Okay.
Hang on 1 second. I'm just going to grab a box. I want to show
Okay.
you the crypt.
Sounds like the phytoplankton that
Marine
Brian.
phytoplankton, yeah.
Yeah.
You may have seen this, but I have to buy it at a special place because there's a lot of, like I said, bottles out there. Okay, so then it looks like this.
Oh wow.
What's
Isn't
the
that
name of
trippy?
that company, Frank?
This is ketone.
All right.
And this is a hypertonic. They have what's also called an isotonic. This one is a hypertonic. This is 3 times more concentrated than isotonic. And so what they did with cyclists is they had them do 2 of those before and then 2 of them as a recovery, and every one of them improved in their speed, their mountain climbing, and their recovery. So these are just amateur cyclists, and they were able to, like, oh, well, guess what? It's like if you're not blowing out your electrolytes to the point where you're depleted and you're not able to produce ATP, you're recovering that much more quickly, and you're stimulating or giving the body all these other nutrients that are found in the marine-based plasma. It's pretty cool.
Frank, we've spoke a couple times on this podcast about meeting people or having conversations and things kind of being in line and happening for a reason. I needed this talk. We connected a lot of dots more than you'll know, but bringing up autobiography of a yogi, kind of talking about people having trouble with eating too much fruit or being a vegan. I've kind of gone through that process in the past year and kind of getting back on, I wouldn't say keto, but more of that carnivore type based lifestyle and getting my strength back. So connected a lot of dots here, and I could talk to you about nutrition and sound healing all day. We want to be respectful of your time. We do want to get into one of the projects that you mentioned before we hopped on. Really kind of intrigued me about what you're working on right now. So, let everyone know what you're working on and kind of what you're trying to get going right now.
So the project that we were talking about was that I met a guy on Facebook that is a wrestling dad. He has sons that wrestle. He has a group of club that that are high school or grade school that he works with as well. But he's also a producer, and he was a big fan of Vision Quest. He loved Vision Quest. He actually has a signed copy of the original, script. He met Terry Davis. He helped Terry Davis, who wrote the book, the original Vision Quest book, helped him during a time when he was trying to get some more work from Warner Brothers, but Warner Brothers has the IP for the Vision Quest. So he was able to do a deal for Terry to get him a book deal. So now Terry is writing a book. But in the meantime, I talked to my partner, whose name is Michael Gray, out there in New Jersey, another New Jersey connection. And we decided, like, we're not going to wait for a movie, second. We're not going to try and reboot it. We're not going to try and do a Vision Quest 2, but we just love the idea of a series. And so it's a similar to 30 years later, kind of like a Cobra Kai concept, where we looked at these characters to see where they are now and kind of go back and visit what happened to them right after that big match. What happened to Matthew? What happened to Shute? Why did Shute lose? What was going on in Shute's life? Where did that take Matthew? What did Matthew do with that? Did he end up wrestling in college, or did he become, a doctor? We don't know. So we got a lot of questions we want to answer in this, but it's a series that's a little gritty. And it's going to, again, have wrestling in it. Both parents will have kids that will be wrestling. And so we're going to also bring in women's wrestling, because women's wrestling is the bomb. I have to say, it is huge. And we've got some tremendous women athletes. So of course we have to bring in women wrestlers into the series. So we've created a series and we're shopping it. It's gotten some very good response back, and we're still trying to put the final pieces together to make this happen. But like you said, it's all has its right time, and we keep grinding. That's it. We just keep grinding at this and see where it's going to go.
It's so interesting you mentioned kind of that Cobra Kai connection because during COVID, we had a sister podcast that we did with our cousins, and we would do watch alongs. And one of the watch alongs that we did was Cobra Kai, and Rich had mentioned something like, "Man, they need to do something like this for Vision Quest." So it's so interesting that you kind of bring that up, as that's kind of the basis of it, or kind of what you're gonna do with it.
Yeah, and so what I also wanted to say to you, because you had talked about this vegetarian, we talked about, how do you be a vegetarian? If there's a way to do it, there's a woman that I also studied with and read and followed her process for a while, and that's Victoria Butenko. And she's called the smoothie queen or whatever, the queen of the green smoothie. And just quickly, her family has some different health issues. Different family members have different things. And so she put them on a vegetarian diet and they all did really well for a little while. And then they hit a wall. And then she says, okay, I got to try something else. So she said, okay, let's just juice for a while, see if that and helps. And so she put them on, they were all juicing. And so that carried them for a certain while and they hit a wall again. And then she said, well, what is it that we're losing in the juicing that's stopping us from continuing to heal? Well, it's all the fiber. So she started doing what's called blending. And so what blending allows you to do, because the vegetarians, we don't have the enzymes that we used to be able to break the cell wall. Like cows have, 6 stomachs or 8 stomachs? I don't know what. They have a lot of stomachs where it ferments. Gorillas have a big, huge gut that sits and the food ferments. And what happens during fermentation is it breaks the cell wall, releases the protein, so you can access protein. Well, if you put in a high-speed, powerful blender like a Vitamix or a Blendtec or maybe even some of the ninjas, I'm not sure. If it's powerful enough, it will break the cell wall. So as long as you diversify your grains, you can do some really amazing things being a vegetarian and doing blended green drinks. And if I was going to recommend anything to any vegetarian, that's what I would have them do and incorporate. Even if they did nothing else but just do that with whatever else they're doing, which has had shown very profound health benefits. And actually, they did a test with a bunch of athletes. One was an endurance athlete, and one was a what are they, CrossFit athlete. So they had both of them just adding a green drink to their daily routine, and they both had met their hit higher personal bests, and then also the runners really noticed that they recovered much faster. So I just wanted to kind of give the vegetarians, if there's vegetarians out there, I prefer to have some animal products in my meals, but I'll have vegetarian meals from time to time, right? So I don't completely shy away from that, but I do have protein. I love fish, for protein as far as I love, sometimes a ribeye, it tastes just right, and so I like that. And sometimes some just good, well-made burger, with vegetables. And you can do that and just not do the bun. See, then you just get rid of the fries, have a salad, have your burger, just don't do it, just do it in a power wrap. And it's a simple shift. And it makes all the difference.
Frank, I appreciate your knowledge and your mindset with things. Really enjoy this conversation. Rich, before we get into the final four, anything I missed or anything else you want to ask Frank?
No, I mean, I think you hit the nail right on the head. We could,
No, I was thinking about, sorry if I, it's just a lot of fun talking to you guys. I realize that you are deep into the things that I care and have passion about. So thank you for having me on.
Rich, you there?
yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say you hit the nail on the head. We could talk to Frank all day about nutrition and the connections to athletes and all that stuff, but we want to be respectful of his time. So, um, I'd say we get into the final four.
All right, Frank, you already answered this question a little bit, but Are you a coffee drinker? Yes. How do you brew your coffee and how do you take it?
So there's a few different ways that I take it, and it's basically I do every morning. I'll do a fresh brew, and then I will add some grass-fed butter, and I have this powder that is a pure C8, and I have the bulletproof brain octane that I'll put a little bit of that in there as well, and then I'll have fresh coffee in there. I'll blend it and it's like a latte. It is fantastic, man. I just love the taste. I love the flavor. I love how it feels. I love the like the fat still stuck on my lips afterwards when I finish. And oh, what I also do is that I'll do a few shakes of Himalayan salt in there too. Unless you go and get the Danger coffee. I don't know if you heard about this, but David Asprey has a brand now that is called Danger coffee. And in there, he's got the electrolytes. He's got the fulvic and vulvic minerals in there already. So if you want to do like a short version, get that. The other thing about doing coffee, guys, is I just want to say if you're going to drink coffee that is mycotoxin free. Do the work. There's over 6 different coffee brands that have mycotoxin free coffee. Please just spend the money, do that. There's 91.7% of all coffee has mycotoxins, and that's just mold. Okay, so that's mold in your coffee, and then you're going to drink that every day. That just doesn't help. And the other thing that doesn't help is anytime you add dairy to your coffee, other than grass-fed butter, then you destroy the benefits that you get from it. So take the time, put some healthy fat in there, get some mold-free coffee, and enjoy that coffee in the morning.
Frank, what was that powder you mentioned?
It was just a pure C8 powder. Elevate is it's called, I'm trying to think of the company that puts that out, BioTrust.
Okay.
So look up BioTrust and they're like Keto Elevate. It's got some stevia in it, but it's such a small amount. Stevia also helps with blood sugar. I don't care for stevia myself personally. I would sweeten anything if I needed to with monk fruit if I was going to do that.
Okay. Frank, do you have a daily practice or ritual that you do on a regular basis to show up as the strongest version of Frank Jasper?
I make sure that I get between 7 to 9 hours of sleep. I make sure that I'm hydrating on a regular basis. I incorporate at least 10 to 15 minutes of silence, of just breathing in. And when I'm walking my dog, I'll do different movements to help activate the energy flow through my body. And so I start my day off after my coffee. I'll take the dog out for a walk and I'll come back and I've had my water, I've had my coffee, I'll have walked, and then I'll get into my office and sit and maybe do a meditation prior to starting my day. And of course, I was going to say, I also take supplements with, but it's like I take them every day and I monitor those because the other piece that we didn't talk about today, which is maybe for another time, is a hormetic effect or hormesis, which means everything has a therapeutic dose. And so it's not just that you get the right nutrient, but you have to get the right dose. And our needs as people, as athletes, will change according to the stresses, the goals, the challenges that we face on a daily basis. So those need to be monitored. And that's what I do in my practice is I will monitor those. I sometimes check in with Nick almost every day and we just really kind of dial it in because he's getting ready for one of the biggest events of his entire life, which is Olympic trials.
Oh yeah.
Let's go.
Let's go, Suriano.
Frank, what are you listening to right now? Music, podcasts, audiobooks? Are you reading anything?
I'm reading. I just got a book and I haven't started reading it yet, and it's Life Between. I'm trying to think what the name is. Life Between Lives. And I I'm also doing, I love doing, YouTubes when I can and podcasts, but I always like to listen to what's happening out there in the nutrition world, what's in the fasting world, and what I knew there's some new things that are really fascinate me, which are peptides and bioregulators. I didn't even touch on those, but those are just another big field that we can talk about another time, guys.
Yeah, we're definitely gonna have to get you back, Frank. I just have a list of questions I want to get into. Frank, last one we have for you. Do you have a guilty pleasure or guilty pleasures?
Ooh. Um, I used to be big into ice cream. I mean, it's like my wife would go, I would have like a pint of ice cream, walk in the door, and if I had more than, or if I went and just got scoops, my wife would check and she would tell what kind of a day I had by how many scoops of ice cream that I had in
Mhm.
my little container here at the end of the day. But that was years and years ago. So if I ever do go back to a guilty pleasure, that would be either like ice cream because of how what it meant to me as a child. Because in our house there was a lot of stress and anxiety, and nobody talked about anything. And my dad was really shut down, but he was a workaholic. But when we finished dinner, then we all would go and get a bowl of ice cream and sit in front of the TV, and everything was quiet, and we watched TV and everybody was happy. And so it was very soothing. And so I have this special place in my heart for ice cream. And then the other thing would be I love sourdough French toast that I would make, and I will sometimes put almond butter on that. Um, yeah, and that's rare, but it is every now and then.
Have you tried ice cream on top of the sourdough French toast?
No, I haven't. And anyway, it's like, sometimes you feed the body, sometimes you feed the soul.
Yeah,
Uh, but if you feed the soul too much crap, it's going to feel crappy.
yeah,
So just give it some every now and then. Don't try, it's like if you're doing it on a daily basis, then it's probably, and it's not great, then it's not really feeding you, then it becomes an addiction and you're dependent upon it. But if you do it every now and then when it just sounds right and it's like you're not overdoing it either, then, just enjoy it. That's why I tell people just, it's like 80-20. 80% of the time you should be eating really healthy. 20%, maybe not so, you know, enjoy life.
everything in
Amen.
moderation. Amen.
Frank, thank you so much for your time tonight, sir. Really enjoyed this conversation. Really enjoyed the avenues we went down and the knowledge that you gave us. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, guys. One of the few podcasts that I've done where we actually talked about energy, spiritual things, other than maybe Jay Moore's, because he was on the table experiencing that. He's had some pretty powerful experiences, and left a couple of times, kind of floating out of the room. So, um, thanks for bringing that up, sharing it. You guys are really getting some good stuff out there, doing some great things for yourselves, and bringing this kind of podcast out there. Thank you guys for doing that.
Yeah, thank you, Frank. It was a pleasure and an honor to meet you and chat with you tonight. So thank you very much for your time.